Previously on the channel, I've talked about some reptiles that make great choices for your first ever pet reptile. And one of the main perks of most of these is that they don't cost that much. Most of the ones I've recommended you can get for under $100. But what if you watching this at home right now are a millionaire and money doesn't really matter much to you? What if you don't care about a leopard gecko costing $30 or a beardy costing $50? What if you want something that's beginner friendly, but you don't mind if the price tag is over $1,000? So today I break down 5 reptiles that can make really solid choices for your first ever pet reptile. It's just the price tag associated with them is much higher than most other beginner reptiles. And if you are watching this at home and you actually are a millionaire, you can check out my Patreon. Beginner reptiles is a topic that comes up very often online and even in person when I do programs. I get asked probably at least every other show by a parent, hey, what's a good first pet snake or lizard for my kid? And I mean, usually when you look up online, it's a lot of the same answers. It's gonna be crested geckos, corn snakes, leopard geckos. Even if you just search best beginner reptiles here on YouTube, almost all the videos, everyone's talking about the same 10 or so species, including my own videos, because it's a hard to escape fact that these are really the best beginner reptiles out there for someone brand new to reptile keeping. And one of the main selling points with most of these, like I said, you can get them for fairly cheap. Most of these reptiles you can get for under 100, 150 bucks. So today I want to talk about 5 reptiles that are fairly easy for someone brand new to reptile keeping to take care of. Their care requirements aren't that extreme. There's something that really anyone can be able to do. It's just these animals will cost that $500 to $1,000 or even more dollars. For this list, I'm going to be going in ascending order of price. So the number 1 reptile will be the most expensive, but not necessarily the best beginner reptile of the 5. Some of the other ones might be, I think, easier for most people to take care of. But regardless, all 5 of these, all their care requirements are going to be something that really anyone can wrap their head around. And also for this list, we're going to be talking just US dollars and US sales, because I'm from the United States. I'm not a breeder. I don't breed any of my reptiles, so I'm already kind of far removed from like modern, up-to-date breeding prices and stuff on all these. I just look these up online on like Fauna Classifieds and stuff, because maybe these reptiles aren't even available in your country, or maybe they're cheaper or even more expensive in your country. So today, just US sales. So in neither of my top 5 best beginner reptiles videos did I talk about turtles or tortoises, because the most popular pet turtle that's sold is the red-eared slider, and I don't really agree with them being sold because I think there's too many out there anyways and they're invasive. But the most popular pet tortoise that's sold is the Russian tortoise. And Russian tortoises are small and they do make great pets, but I don't really recommend them very often because tortoises live so long. I mean, Russian tortoises still live a lot of decades, even with their size. So they're not something I would really recommend much. Saying that though, there is a tortoise species that doesn't get very big and also doesn't live very long compared to other tortoises. Pancake tortoises are one of the world's smallest tortoise species, and I've talked about them before on the channel. They are famous for having this very flat, smushed pancake shell. Now, obviously, Blueberry's not perfectly flat because her previous owner took really bad care of her. After 15 years, she got a lot of pyramiding, but still not that bad. But pancake tortoises, this is about as big as they get. You're looking at an adult female right here, and they only live about 30 years in captivity, which is very short compared to other tortoises. Unfortunately, many of the ones sold for a long time were mostly wild caught, which is doubly unfortunate because they're very endangered in the wild. But luckily now there are a lot more captive breeders working with them, so you can find captive bred pancake tortoises for sale. It's just that's also going to make the price a little bit higher. Now, one of the main factors in their endangerment in the wild, their uncommonness in captivity, and also their escalated price as a pet is because the reproduction rate is so slow. One pancake tortoise female, like Blueberry here, will lay a single egg, just one per laying. So you're lucky if you get 2 or 3 eggs throughout the year, compared to like other tortoise species where you get 10 to 20, 30 eggs a laying. You can end up with 90 to 100 babies in a year. So they reproduce so much slower. So for these reasons and just their general uncommonness and sometimes difficulty finding a captive bred one, now again, like I said, recent years it's much easier, but that made the price on these guys go quite a bit high, especially if you compare it to like baby sulcata tortoises, which breed like reptile rabbits. You can get a baby sulcata tortoise for like 50 to 60 bucks at an expo, even if that thing gets massive. Here you have a tortoise that is a very good size for most people, but it's a lot more expensive. If you would like to have one of these little breakfasty tortoises, you're looking at $500 to $900 depending on the age, the size, the coloration, and if it's captive bred or not. Now with these guys, they're really not hard to house. They need UV lighting and such like any tortoise does, but they're not huge, they're not super strong, so you don't have to worry about getting a huge enclosure with really sturdy walls like you would for a sulcata or even like a mountain tortoise or a radiated tortoise. Little tortoise, but a big hole in the wallet. But if it wasn't for their price, I would put these on my top 5 beginner reptiles list, even for cheap ones, because like these guys are just amazing pets, especially compared to other tortoise species. This is something I think really anyone can master the care of. For the rest of the reptiles on this list, I don't have the exact reptiles like I did the pancake tortoise, so we're going to talk about somewhat similar ones. Now, milk snakes were actually just on my top 5 beginner reptiles part 2 video a couple weeks ago, because milk snakes are amazing pet snakes, and this is Vincent, my Pueblan milk snake. And these guys, they don't get very big. They're very docile for the most part. I would just say they're not as good as corn snakes because they tend to be a little bit more skittish overall. One of the best parts about them though is that they're really not that expensive. You get a whole bunch of morph and subspecies and color variety for less than $100. Black milk snakes though are a subspecies of milk snake that you will not be finding at a pet store anytime soon, let alone for pet store prices. Black milk snakes are actually the largest type of milk snake, and care-wise, all of the milk snakes, they're all fairly similar. I mean, obviously they get different sizes. They don't have intense heat or humidity requirements or anything like that. Because of their size difference, because black milks can get up to 6 feet long, much bigger than Pueblans like Vincent here, this is adult size, they do need a bit bigger of an enclosure, something like 3x2 or 4x2 should be fine, but it's still nothing like the size of a carpet python or a boa constrictor, so it's very manageable. There are a couple of dark colubrids we can kind of compare with the black milk snake, the main one being the Mexican black king snake, which are a somewhat expensive pet snake that have really blown up in recent years. You can get a baby coming in around $150 to $200, and they have this sleek coloration like you can see on Toothless here with this bright reflective belly. Eastern indigo snakes on the other end, like my collie here, they are also very sought after in the pet trade because they're kind of called like the king of the colubrids, but they have this really black reflective body, but they grow even larger with males hitting 8 feet and females usually getting around 6 feet. And they're way more expensive than Mexican black king snakes or even black milk snakes, like $1,000 to $1,500, but there are a lot of regulations around them. Black milk snakes are kind of like the perfect storm between Eastern indigo snakes and Mexican black king snakes because they don't get as big as Eastern indigo snakes. They are much more beginner friendly. Indigos are not a good beginner snake. They're also not as voracious of eaters, and they also are more expensive than the Mexican black king snake, but they're still a great beginner snake. They also don't start out with that black coloration. They start out looking like a regular old milk snake, and then as they grow up, they develop that black. This is probably the cheapest price range on our list, with the smaller, normal coloration ones going for like $300 to $350, and then the big, really dark adults going for $700 to $800. So it is a little bit cheaper than the pancake tortoise, but still, this is not a dime a dozen colubrid. Leopard geckos and crested geckos dominate the pet market and are on like everyone's top 5 beginner reptiles list, including my own, for good reason, because they don't get very big, they're very easy to find, they're very easy to house, they're very easy to handle, very easy to feed. And on the flip side of that, there's a lot of expensive geckos out there, like the numerous types of lychee geckos that get over $1,000, but they do not make good first pets for anyone, really. So is there a gecko that is easy to take care of, but also very expensive? The answer are knobtail geckos, which are a group of Australian geckos that are roughly leopard gecko sized, but they look very different. They also don't live nearly as long as most other popular pet geckos, coming in around 10 to 12 years compared to other geckos 20 to 25. They are somewhat similar to leopard geckos care-wise, not exactly, but they like it hot. They're gonna live on a dry substrate, so like a topsoil sand mix or even paper towel or something like that. They're insectivores, so they're always going to eat some type of bug like crickets or small roaches. They're nocturnal, so they don't need a UV light because they're not out during the day. And also, on top of all of that, they don't technically need a water bowl. A lot of keepers keep them without a water bowl because they don't drink standing water. They just mist them every day. Also, being an Aussie reptile, Australia banned the export or import of animals out of their country. So all of the knobtail geckos you're going to find for sale are all captive bred, which is preferred, especially for your first ever pet reptile, because captive bred ones are much easier to work with, adapt to you, feed, handle, all that stuff compared to wild caught ones. Well, this is a good thing. It also means the price is going to be a lot higher, which you find with a lot of the more uncommon to rare Australian reptiles for sale over here in the States. Now, there are about a dozen species of knobtail geckos, with most of them being available as pets, but the price will range depending on which species you're looking at and also their coloration. At the lower end, you're looking at about $300 to $500 a gecko, but at the higher end, for the rarer species, you can easily spend over $1,000 for one. And just as a reminder, this is US sales, because over in Australia, these are going to be significantly cheaper because these guys are kind of your leopard gecko equivalent because you can't get them there. Spotted pythons, along with their close cousins, the Stimson's python and the children's python, are amazing first pet snakes for any first timer. And unfortunately, they're very underrated and overlooked in the pet trade. They are very docile, very easy to handle. They don't get very big. They're from the genus Antaresia, which are actually the world's smallest pythons, really. They're also just very easy to house, very easy to feed, and they're fairly inexpensive. In this genus Antaresia, though, there is one snake that actually is crowned the smallest python species alive today, and it is also number 2 on our list, the anthill python. This little snake maxes out at about 1.5 feet in length. It's adorable, and by all appearances is basically just a smaller spotted python. There's really no differences in care as far as heat and humidity goes. It's just they're smaller. So smaller snake means smaller enclosure, smaller food. They don't get anywhere near the size of these guys, and even then, spotted pythons aren't huge. They get like 4.5 feet long at the max. So these are all just very small snakes. Despite being smaller than any other python species, the price tag is actually a bit heftier than most of them, especially compared to some of your really commonly bred pythons like balls and burms, just because, again, with Australia's export ban, there's just not as big of a kind of population of breeders here in the United States. If you would like a pet anthill python, you're going to be looking at $500 to $600 for a hatchling. And if you would like an adult, then you're looking at probably about $1,100, $1,200, $1,300, which maybe even more if you want like fancy coloration or better breeding lineages. Again, I'm not a breeder, but these guys are very expensive for a snake that doesn't even outgrow a female Kenyan sand boa. For number 1, we have a lizard that actually came in number 2 on my top 5 expensive pet reptiles list, because this is a very expensive lizard, but it also happens to be a pretty good beginner lizard. The shingleback skink is a close cousin to the blue-tongued skink. They're in the same genus, and they are a very bizarre, alien-looking little knobby lizard covered in head-to-toe thick, scaly armor. Shingleback skinks are, again, from Australia, but they are still way more uncommon of a pet even in Australia than, say, like northern blue tongues, which are a more expensive species compared to the Indonesian blue tongues like Lou here. Saying that, their care is fairly similar to blue-tongued skinks. Now, they're not as easy as like crested geckos or leopard geckos, for example, but compared to most of the other reptiles out there, other lizards, they are far easier to take care of. They are omnivores, just like blue-tongued skinks, so they're gonna get a mix of bugs and salad. They also don't get huge, so like a 3 foot by 2 foot enclosure. They don't need it wicked hot. They don't need it really humid, like 50 to 60%. They're also fairly easy going in nature, and all in all, they're fairly easy to handle and would be a great option for parents looking for a pet lizard for their kids. The hang up though is that this is one expensive lizard. Outside of Australia, there really aren't many for sale. Even if you look on like Fauna Classifieds, there's only a few small handful of sales over the last decade plus. So if you want one of these little stubby, bizarre looking lizards, you're gonna need to drop anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 for one. And that's if you can find one, because like I said, remember, they're very rare. So, I mean, why buy a new used car or pay off your student loans so you can buy a little chunky 2-pound lizard? People have that kind of money laying around, right? So those were 5 very expensive reptiles that are also very easy for beginners to take care of. Like the video if you learned something. Thank you to our amazing patrons for supporting the channel. It means a lot to me. If you'd like to do that for as low as $3 a month, I mean, that's a lot cheaper than any of the reptiles I talked about today, but link for that will be down below. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you later.